Earth, water, air, and fire, the classical elements. These were the ancient world's primitive categorization of matter, regarded as the foundational, irreducible substances of nature. Today we know that is not the case, but were the ancients more accurate than we often assume? These categorizations have been recently revisited as a correlation to what we know now as the four states of matter: solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. Is that what the ancients were ultimately trying to convey? In the 4th century BC, Empedocles of Archagos first proposed the four roots: fire, air, water, and earth, as the eternal, unchanging fundamental constituents of all matter. Plato adopted and geometricized them, while Aristotle gave the interpretation of them that dominated Western thought for nearly 2,000 years. In 1661, Robert Boyle became one of the first major scientific critics of the classical four-element theory. In The Skeptical Chymist, he argued that the traditional elements were not truly elementary or irreducible, but were complex mixtures or compounds that could be broken down further by chemical analysis. In 1780, Antoine Lavoisier confirmed Boyle by producing experimental lists of simple substances that could not be further decomposed, giving names to the modern elements such as oxygen and hydrogen. At this point, the classical elements were disregarded as the scientific world went on to develop the periodic table. Curiously, Lavoisier also did some important work on the distinction of states of matter, which also had ancient roots, particularly Aristotle's Meteorologica, Book 4, where solids and liquids were described as dry/wet distinctions. It wasn't until 1648 when Flemish chemist Jan Baptist van Helmont coined the word gas for the invisible, expansive fluids produced in chemical reactions, and the scientific world then distinctly held matter to have its three states of solid, liquid, and gas. Building on work in the 1760s by Joseph Black, who observed the changing states of matter through heat, such as from ice to water, Lavoisier stated that this was true for all substances. Almost a century later, in 1879, British scientist William Crookes observed a glowing, highly energetic form of matter while studying electric discharges in low-pressure gases. He called it radiant matter and explicitly described it as a fourth state of matter, as far removed from the state of gas as a gas is from a liquid. Nearly 50 years later, in 1928, the American chemist Irving Langmuir gave this state its modern name, plasma. He chose the word because the ionized gas reminded him of blood plasma, a fluid medium that carries cells and particles within it. It took more than 20 further years, however, before it was widely recognized as a fourth state of matter in the 1950s, driven by the rise of controlled nuclear fusion research. Now we have come full circle. The ancients used earth, water, air, and fire as their elementary building blocks, later refuted by scientists developing the periodic table of elements. Yet, what the ancients presented was eerily similar to what was later discovered as the four states of matter. That was not what they were originally aiming for, but in the end, they anticipated something that was formalized in the mid-20th century. Could this be history's most curious, unintentional foreshadowing? Thank you for watching.